Hey there, folks. I'm meteorologist Matt Barentine. Obviously, all eyes are on the tropics. We're watching out for the development of a tropical system. This will happen in probably middle next week, maybe early next week, just depending on how things go here. You can see the risk. If you've been following along last couple of days, it keeps going up. Now is up to 50%. So that risk keeps going up because we're getting closer into the time window when it has a likelihood of forming. Of course, that would be all the way through next Friday. Of course, it could go into next weekend. That's why it's only 50% and not higher. So we're looking at a real risk of development down in the southern Gulf and the northern part of the Caribbean. And but all indications are we're going to see a system develop down that way. So let me run through a couple of models with you. Here we are. We're going to start with the European model. And if develops the system into the southwestern Gulf, the Bay of Campeche, that's the area that we call it here. Now, where does it go from there, of course, would be the question mark. And you see have all these different areas going in different ways. And then you even see these areas, look at them, kind of going around in a circle. Guess what? That's what this model keeps wanting to say, that it doesn't get picked up by anything. We have very weak steering currents, and that it just kind of bobbles around for a number of days out here in the Gulf of Mexico. That's definitely one possibility. It could just sit out there, especially if it's in that southwestern corner of the Gulf. There won't be much there to move it along. It's just going to stay stuck here if it does that, and that goes through next Friday. All right, so let me give you the GFS, or the American model, and we're going to see a bit of a different solution here. It forms it more to the east. That would definitely be more problematic for us because more likely it could come up into our general region. Now, where does the GFS or American model eventually take it? Into our area. But this whole model is also taken into to Tampa Bay area and some other spots as well. So we're not the only destination point for this model. And keep in mind, it is just one model, and they run this every 6 hours, and every 6 hours the solution is a bit different. So don't get too worried yet, but just remember that, hey, coming right towards us, it is a possibility. It's definitely a possibility. That would be, if that happens, that would be next weekend. Not this weekend, obviously, but next weekend. So here's the thing. The good thing about all this is that we have time. We have time. This weekend's going to be nice. It's going to be hot, but it's going to be nice. No worries about anything. So if you're out doing your thing, whatever your plans are for this weekend, I'm just telling you to take a few minutes, and take an inventory. What do you have? Do you have everything you need? Do you have gas in the car? Do you have gas cans for the generator? What are you going to do to protect the windows? What are you going to do, in this scenario or that scenario? Go through your plans. Make sure you have your medicines and all that stuff. Get that stuff taken care of early this weekend, Monday or Tuesday, and then when everybody else is flipping out on Thursday and Friday, you're good to go. So, and if you're watching this here on our Fox 10 weather app, you're the kind of person that's likely going to get out ahead of this thing. You're interested. You're keeping an eye on things. So I'm telling you right now, get ready this weekend. And if it doesn't come our way, hey, great. You got some extra canned food, right? So no worries, right? And you got stuff to barbecue, whatever. Just don't get yourself ready. Make some time this weekend. Take an inventory. Think about what you need if a storm does come your way. Do you have a boat in the water? I would get that out early rather than later. All right. So just take care of all these things. And once again, if it doesn't come our way, hey, you're just being a Boy Scout, right? Here's my worry, right? Because if it does come our way, the water temperatures are in the mid to upper 80s across the Gulf. This thing and the upper level conditions will be very favorable for not just development, but for rapid growth, rapid intensification. Anything above 84 degrees leads to rapid intensification if you have the right conditions in the upper levels of the atmosphere. We'll have all that. So if it does come our way, it'll be a quickly strengthening storm. Of course, a lot will depend on exactly how fast it would be moving and all that. So there's still obviously tons of question marks. But I mean, hey, we live on the Gulf Coast. This is the height of hurricane season. We know that a devastating hurricane is never out of the realm of possibilities. It's not the 100% possibility by any stretch here for us this time around. This easily could miss us or never really come to fruition. But just plan for the worst and hope for the best. That's usually the best way to go, right? And that's what we're looking at here with this possible storm. Now, just so you know, the name would likely be Helene. I don't think another one out in the Atlantic is going to form first. So if this becomes a storm, which I'm pretty sure at this point we're going to see a storm in the Gulf next week, it'll be Helene. That will be the name of this upcoming system. So here are the key takeaways. I'm anticipating formation early to mid next week, very likely. The models have a ton of uncertainties. I just showed you our two major models. One spins it in the Gulf for several days. The other brings it up our way or brings it over to Tampa Bay. It's had multiple solutions. There is another big model called the Canadian model, which isn't as good with hurricanes. I don't tend to look at it a whole lot, but just for here, I wanted to check it out. The Canadian model has been very, very high on it going into Louisiana. So, I mean, there's really a wide spread of different possibilities here. So, a lot of uncertainties. The things we do know for certain is that it's very likely to happen, that we're going to have, a system in the Gulf next week, and that we need to be prepared. That's number 3 key takeaway. Be prepared, have your hurricane plan in place, know what you're going to do. And also, the last thing on there, be cautious of social media posts. Just like I just said, every one of those models just talked about, they run them 4 times a day. So people are taking that, hey, it's making landfall in Mobile Bay, and then posting it on, on social media. Remember, that is just one possibility. It is not gospel. Meteorologists, we call models guidance because they can provide us some guidance, but they cannot provide us with certainties, especially this far out. I mean, we get 2 or 3 days out, things get better. But when we're talking the following weekend, we're talking 8 and 9 days out. Anything beyond about 5 days with tropical gets really dicey, especially after 7 days. After 7 days, it gets really bad. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen here yet, but we have some things that we figure, and that is that we are going to be dealing with a tropical system in the Gulf here sometime next week. Now, right now, oops, why did it go back? Skipped way forward there. All right. Looking at what's happening down there right now, you can see there are some clouds and some storms. What we're actually starting to see is what we call the Central American Gyre setup. And what that is a very large, broad area of low pressure. And they're very common. They typically happen in the spring, say in May and early June. And then they tend to happen again right around fall. Of course, Sunday is the first day of fall. So this is very common. And what it is it's just a big, broad area of disturbed weather that happens over Central America. And when these set up, as meteorologists, tropical meteorologists, we're always looking for these things because when they do set up, very often they create tropical systems. And a lot of times they'll create them on the other side, over there in the Pacific part, because it covers all of, like you see the arrows there, it goes all through Central America, parts of Mexico. So it can spawn storms on either side, and at times on both sides. There's been times when the Gyre there'll be one storm on the Atlantic side and one storm on the Pacific side. I know it's the Caribbean and the Gulf, but we call it the Atlantic side. So that's what's happening. Already started, and this was the first hint. We talked about this days ago that we were seeing this Gyre set up, and this was our first hint that some issues were going to start popping up down here. And I think I first talked about it, I want to say Monday or Tuesday on air. It's been a few days. So this has been a long-running thing. We're way out. That's the key thing here too, folks. Remember, we are way out ahead of this once again, so we have time to watch this and to prepare. And let me get this one up here. This one's got a little bit different information. So that development, like I said, is expected over the next few days. I mean, not expected over the next few days, I'm sorry, in the next week. Might have to change the wording on that because it's really past the weekend at this point. And once again, obviously, we're highly uncertain about exactly where it ends up going. But everybody, I mean, from northern Mexico down through the southwest tip of Florida, everybody needs to be keeping an eye on this, because once again, we don't have any good forecast on exactly where it'll end up, because everything is, the steering currents out there are extremely weak. And there's just not much to steer it. In fact, let me stop this real quick, because this is interesting here. Remember, I talked about sometimes it pops them up on either side. And here's the European model on 11 a.m. Tuesday, and it's showing, if you look down there near El Salvador on the Pacific side, it shows a quick spin up of a possible tropical system down that way. Looks like it goes basically into land right away. It doesn't last very long. And then it shows the other one spinning up on our side down the southwestern Gulf. And that's going to happen with these gyres. They can spin them up on either side. And that's the European model. Remember I said the European model, what it's been doing is it kind of leaves it hung up down there in the southwestern Gulf and kind of just spins around. The American model keeps wanting to bring it up somewhere between Biloxi and Tampa Bay. That's been the solutions over the last several days, is Biloxi to Tampa Bay. That's what this model has been saying, the GFS or the American model. People ask me all the time, which one's the better model? Honestly, some storms the GFS does better, some storms the European does better, and the problem is, looking at it right now, is that it hasn't formed yet. So I would say neither storm is going to have a good grip on exactly where it's going to go yet, because if you don't know exactly where something is starting, it's really hard to tell where something is going to end up, and we don't have a good idea of where it's starting. And both the GFS and the European model are starting this in two different areas. The GFS is starting it somewhere near the tip of Cuba, and the European model is starting it over in the southwestern Gulf, the Bay of Campeche, pretty far apart. That's a pretty big difference. Once it actually does form, wherever it does, then the American model and the European model will have a much better idea, and we'll get a lot better information. But that's going to take some time. Like I said, we have time, and that's the good thing about this. You got time. This weekend's going to be good. It's going to be a nice weekend. Plenty of time to get out there, take that inventory, know what you're going to do, and get ready for this possible storm. It's I'm coming up to 2:50. I got a 3 o'clock show to do, so I got to take off. But once again, thank you for joining us here on Fox 10. We'll keep you up to date and let you know what's happening with this system as we get into next week.